The United States Navy went to federal court to own 53 human beings. As salvage, that is not a metaphor, it is a docket entry. In the summer of 1839, a low black schooner called La Amistad zigzagged up the American coast, ragged and short of water, sailing east by day and north by night. Aboard were 53 kidnapped West Africans, 49 men and 4 children, led by a Mande rice farmer named Sengbe Pie, whom the American records call Cinque. Months earlier, he had been seized near his home in what is now Sierra Leone, held at a slave depot on the coast, and shipped to Havana in violation of Spain's own treaties banning the Atlantic trade. In Havana, his captors bought fraudulent passports describing the captives as Cuban-born slaves with Spanish names. Paper to launder a crime. On the night of July 1, 1839, bound along the Cuban coast, the captives freed themselves. By the traditional account, Cinque worked a nail loose and picked the locks. In the fight for the deck, the captain and the cook were killed. The 2 Spaniards who had bought them were spared to navigate and ordered to sail east into the sunrise back to Africa. Instead, they steered east by day and northwest by night. On August 26, the brig Washington seized the schooner off Long Island, and its officers filed a claim in Admiralty for salvage, covering the vessel, the cargo, and the people aboard. Rival claims followed. The Spanish purchasers claimed them as goods, Spain demanded them as merchandise, and the government of the United States argued they should be handed over. For 18 months, American courts weighed who owned whom. The captives sat in a New Haven jail and could not testify because no one in Connecticut shared a language with them. So a Yale professor named Josiah Gibbs learned to count to 10 in Mende and walked the waterfronts of New York and New Haven, counting aloud to strangers. On the docks, a young African-born sailor named James Covey recognized his own language and turned around. Everything that followed flowed through that moment. With Covey interpreting, Cinque and the others finally testified. Consistent, detailed accounts of kidnapping, the depot, the crossing, the sail. The forged passports collapsed. The children were plainly too young for the Cuban birth the papers claimed. In January 1840, District Judge Andrew Judson, no friend of abolition, ruled the captives were born free, kidnapped, and illegally transported. They were not property. President Van Buren had stationed the warship Grampus in the harbor, waiting to rush them to Cuba the moment the ruling went his way, before any appeal could be heard. The judge ruled against him. The ship sailed away empty. The government appealed to the Supreme Court, a bench historians describe as dominated by slaveholders. And John Quincy Adams, former President of the United States, 73 years old and 3 decades out of Supreme Court practice, rose for the captives. He spoke for roughly 8.5 hours across 2 sittings, split apart when a justice died during the argument days, and pointed at the Declaration of Independence hanging on the courtroom wall. On March 9, 1841, the court ruled 7-1. The captives had never been lawfully slaves at all. A kidnapped free person may lawfully resist, but the court struck the order to return them home at public expense, so the survivors, free and stranded, spent 8 months touring churches and meeting halls, speaking through interpreters, raising their own fare. In November 1841, about 35 of the original 53 sailed for Africa and reached Sierra Leone in January 1842. The case freed them and changed nothing else. American slavery stood for another 24 years. Antonio, the enslaved cabin boy, was ruled property and reached freedom only through the Underground Railroad. But the record of the Supreme Court now said, and still says, that resistance to kidnapping is not a crime. This has been under oath.